It was one of those fucking awful, grey, damp, and bitterly cold days in June that England was so good at. Angus Lovejoy didn't want to be here, obviously. Who'd choose to be at a funeral for someone you'd never known? Personally, that is. Of course, he knew who Danny Deeds had been. He'd been the Deeds of Gordon Deeds Rutter, the ad agency he now found himself working at. Well, the word working may have been pushing it a tad. He'd been here for a month now, and still hadn't received a sodding creative brief. Not that he was complaining. If truth be known, he'd been a bitter disappointment to his parents. They had had high hopes for him. They had set their sights on the Foreign Office. But it all started going horribly wrong when he'd been sent down from Charterhouse for shagging the Chancellor's daughter in the cricket pavilion. Still, as far as he was concerned, he envisaged a reasonably bright future for himself in the advertising game. GTR was, after all, one of London's most creative hotshops, and its creative director, Magnus O'Shea, had loved his portfolio of TV scripts and press ads. The agency had been informed of Danny Deeds' premature demise no more than a week ago. It was Dick, the chauffeur, who had broken the news. Dick was a lovely man. He had been affectionately known by one and all as Danny's Dick. Danny, needless to say, had been gay, flamboyant, and about as promiscuous as it was possible to be. He'd made his name in the 50s as a TV producer when commercial television was just starting out, and had single-handedly set up one of London's first commercial production companies. On the back of this early success, he had then gone on to set up his own advertising agency and was eventually bought out on very amicable and favourable terms by the current partners. In fact, he had even retained an office in the building from which he apparently wrote TV commercials for his own client, some large part-work magazine publisher. The strange thing was that Danny Deeds may have been a clever sod with a certain charm and twinkle in the eye, but according to everyone who knew him, he didn't possess a single creative bone in his body, and the commercials he penned for his client were something of an embarrassment to the agency. Indeed, the management never knowingly advertised the fact. The vicar had finished his short address and had now gesticulated to an old boy in a morning suit and tails who stumbled forward to the dais and coughed and spluttered into the microphone. "Today is a very sad day. My name is Bernard Smythe Watney, and I knew Danny way back in the 50s when we worked together producing TV commercials for the likes of Players Cigarettes and Johnny Walker. Oh, those were the days! What a lovely man he was! Salt of the earth. They just don't make 'em like that anymore." Angus was sitting next to a man in a trench coat that he'd spoken to earlier. He'd been the agency's first creative director, and now the man was discreetly leaning forward and whispering into Angus's ear. "Funny that. I always thought he was a bit of a shit."